My nonprofit organization is an entrepreneurial nonprofit organization in that I kind of do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I can be really impatient about it because, you know, when you work in the poverty space, you don't really want to be patient because people are suffering in really unnecessary ways and deep ways that sometimes take their lives. And so, you know, I don't have to tell you guys about serious situations and circumstances, but that is what poverty presents to people. And so I was teaching this class called Health and Social Connection. I said, everybody, we're going to volunteer, and you're going to volunteer at least 8 hours during the semester to work with people in poverty, but not just to do something like clean a neighborhood. You're going to do something where you look people in the eyes, because when you look at people in the eyes, you connect with them in a really human way. And you connect in a way where then I think you start to see your similarities instead of your differences, right? Because we could look at each other, we could say that we're different in 9 different ways out of 10. But the truth is, we're similar in about 99.9% of who we are. But we focus on how we're different, right? Our skin color, our gender, never mind all of the things that were similar about us, how we feel, how we emote, what makes us happy, what makes us sad, right? What makes us angry, you know, all those things. That's how we're similar. So I was wanting my students to really connect to people, because the number one reason people are in poverty, by the way, and maybe you guys know this better than I do, but by far the people we serve about 20,000 people a year, and by far the number one reason is birth, right? It's being unlucky. It's not that people are in poverty because they're lazy, they don't want to work. All that's a myth, and it's usually a myth that we have about people because we don't know them. And so people tend to be in poverty from birth, and they tend to stay there their whole lives. Most of the people we meet are in their 3rd, 4th, or 5th decade of being in poverty. And their kids are in poverty, and if they're in their 5th decade, they may have a grandkid or a great-grandkid who's also in poverty and on that same path. And so I wanted my students to kind of know that the only reason people are in poverty is because of that, and that they weren't in poverty because they were lucky, right? If they weren't, they just happened to get the lottery, the raffle, right, when they were born. And so I said, you're going to volunteer 8 hours, you're going to look at people in the eye, you're going to connect in a meaningful way. And my students kind of looked at me the way some of you are, which is whatever, you know. And so then I said, this is going to be 20% of your grade. And they said, well, I'm in that. I want to volunteer. Help me out. I want to do this. And so we all set out to do things, and I was going to be a hypocrite about it. I was not going to volunteer. I was going to judge them from afar like a professor, and I was going to say, oh, you did a good job at connecting with other people, whereas I wouldn't have done anything, right? But luckily I had a friend, and this friend ran a food pantry. And so he said to me, Mark, I have to go away. Can you deliver food to the people? Entrepreneurial work, whether it's in the for-profit or the nonprofit sector, is really about passion, right? And so if you have a passion and you have an idea about what you're passionate, and you think you got the stuff to stick with it, then you'll be successful, no matter what sector it is into which you go. If you have a passion and you have the stuff inside to stick with it no matter what, which I'm assuming you guys do, right? Because you got special stuff, obviously. So if you got that, then you'll be successful. 500,000 people in the immediate DC region alone live in this kind of condition. 500,000. And that's just in poverty. And poverty line, by the way, for an individual, you are only in poverty if you make less than $11,800 a year. If you make $12,000 a year, you are not considered in poverty. So that 500,000 is with a standard that's really low. Family of 4, by the way, the poverty line is 24,600, something like that. It changes each year by a little smidge. So it's still embarrassingly low. So in other words, if you have a family of 4, you're not considered in poverty if you have $25,000 a year. You try to live on $25,000 a year, you're in poverty, right? But we don't want to increase that number because nobody wants to be in charge when the poverty line or the poverty number goes to what it really is, which is, to me, about 1 out of every 3 people in this country live in need of assistance, right? And we know that it's our responsibility to help them, just like it's our responsibility to stay with veterans. It's the same thing, and by the way, we do a lot with veterans. So ask me about that if I forget, all right? So if that's a question, I'll tell you about how we provide homes and other items for veterans. It's one of the things that we feel extremely excited to be able to do. And that's the story of poverty. It's cyclical, it's generational, and it's so entrenched. It's an intractable situation. So I pulled over on the side of the road and I said, I gotta do something about this. I'm embarrassed I'm not doing more. And so that's how I started the Wider Circle. And I started it to do 4 things. First, to get a bed under every kid, right? And soon I realized, and mom. No, and dad. Anybody who doesn't have a bed, who wants one, right? Let's get a bed. We have enough beds in this country. And if we don't, we can certainly make them quick enough that we ought to be able to get beds under everybody. So that was my first thought. Get items from people or places that had more than they needed and give them to people who did not have enough or did not have anything. And so we started furnishing homes, and then the second thing was I was teaching at AU, right, American University, and so I realized that everything I was teaching to all these students, people who were living in poverty had no access to this information. And there sure as heck wasn't a Barnes & Noble on the corner in their neighborhood, right? In fact, you know what was on the corner in their neighborhood? Take a guess.
Drug dealer.
That's exactly right. Everything you guys just said. Drugs, alcohol, that's what was on every corner. And so, every corner, and payday loans. Right? I thought, well, we'll start going into community centers and shelters, and we'll start teaching nutrition, stress management, self-esteem, financial planning, everything that we think will give people more life skills, a chance to catch up, if you will. So we did that, and then the third thing was I want to connect people who are in poverty with people who are not, because I think, and that this is proven to be true, that what gets people out of poverty, we know why people are in poverty the most, right? Birth. What gets people out of poverty more than anything else, it's not beds or dressers, even though I know it's important that we distribute those. It's not food, it's not clothing, it's other people, right? So that's where you guys are to be an answer for people as well, right? I mean, there's people to serve here. You know, I see them every day by the hundreds and then 20+ thousand a year. And so I wanted to figure out a way to match people with other people. And so that's what we really want to do. It's really more three things. And then the fourth was to try to get into neighborhoods and have centers in the neighborhoods. Because I think if we're going to end poverty, which I do believe we will, we have to. I look at it the same way, by the way, as 100 years ago when every woman in this room could not vote. Right? And I remember, I don't remember this, but I remember reading this, that just 15 years before women got the vote, in 1905, former President Cleveland said, "The wise and sensible woman will not want to vote, and she never will." In the 1950s, you could go anywhere you wanted in the South, and almost anybody who was in a leadership position would say, whites and blacks will never sit together, work together, go to school together. It never happened. I'll give my life before that happens. Some did, but 10 years later it was happening. Right? So we will end poverty. We have to believe we'll end poverty, and then we have to commit to that. And that's what I was thinking as I started A Wider Circle. And so since that time, we have furnished the homes of, well, golly, we've served 185,000 people. That's a lot, right? We furnish every year about 4,500 homes, including many veterans who find themselves without a home. We make sure we work with any different agency that will work with us, and we furnish their homes. So there's one building, for example, called the Kerr Conway House. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It's on North Capitol Street. It's just about 9 blocks. It's 901 North Capitol Street Northeast. So 9 blocks north of Union Station. And it's a mixed-use building where 60 of the 134 units are for veterans, formerly homeless veterans. And they're supposed to be nice units. And so they asked us to furnish all those units. And we use gently used stuff, right? Remember, I get it from people who have more than they need. So we decided for that one we were going to only put in new furniture. So we bought all new furniture and all new stuff, and we furnished all 60 of those units. So it's really cool. And it's permanent supportive housing, right? So everybody who lives there can live there for life, and the second floor of that building is all support services. So it's pretty cool. And we're on another program at the Housing Authority called Fresh Start, where we're going to do 18 units just like that. And we already did 12 of them. So and when we furnish these homes, by the way, the key word is dignity. There's a lot of ways you can choose to run your business. I choose to run it only with dignity and respect for the people we serve. I think you have to have values, and your values have to lead the way, and you can never compromise on those values. Because once you compromise once, it'll be easy to do it a second time, and then you won't recognize yourself in 3 years. You have to believe in yourself really deeply, because nobody encouraged me to do it. I spoke to 50 people, my mentors, my family, and they all said, don't do that. You know, go work for one. You have an income. What do you worked 35 years to get a doctorate, now you're going to go and have zero. And I said, yeah, but this is awful stuff, man. I mean, it's awful, it's atrocious, it's embarrassment. But we can change it. We have to believe that we can change it. That was my mentality, right? It still is today. And then I talked to the 50th person I think I asked for advice was somebody who worked for an organization called the Urban Institute, which is a great think tank on urban issues. And I told her my idea, and I had this 100-page strategic plan. Of course, she didn't want to see that, right? Who wants to read 100 pages? And she said, look, you have to do this. Nobody's doing it on the ground. You have to do this.